everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. It's about how to fix and adjust color problems in wedding and portrait photos with DxO PhotoLab 5. We've got the wonderful Dan Hughes with us. He is, and I'm going to try to get this right, he's got a long title. He is a Chair Photographic Sciences Undergraduate Program Director at Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, which some of you folks might be familiar. Up in New York, there's a big photography school up there. And he teaches photography, he shoots photography. He's been in the industry for many, many years. He started out graduating from RIT and then moving into Nix Software, where he was there for quite a few years in the education department. And then from there, went to several other software companies and ended up at RIT. And he's still doing webinars with us at DxO monthly. So we're real excited to have him with us. And you'll be in good hands with Dan. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dan and let him take you through this presentation. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to have some fun today. I'm presenting entirely from PhotoLab 5. We're primarily going to be talking about how to fix and adjust color. And the images that we're using today are specifically wedding and actually a couple sort of portrait images that could be a wedding image as well. I realized though, looking at them, I only have one interior image and the rest are all exterior or outdoor photos. Probably not a big deal because we can run into color issues in a lot of different places, whether we're inside or outside. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to move over to our other slide instead of just yammering on. These are the things that we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about the PhotoLab 5 interface. We will get into specific tools, the white balance tool, some of the color rendering aspects, HSL and the ColorWheel, as well as using some of the selective capabilities built into PhotoLab 5 for manipulating and controlling color, and then potentially even improving our images, hopefully, is the idea. Now, I'm going to jump right in. We're going to hopefully talk for about 45 or 50 minutes. I try to gauge the webinar so that we have a good amount of time to talk about, look at images, and talk about the interfaces and so on. And then hopefully we'll have a little Q&A afterwards as well. Now, I'm currently in PhotoLab 5, as you can see. I'm in the customize section right now, and I'm just gonna, if you follow into the upper left corner, move over into the photo library, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today they're pretty specific image processing techniques. That is, we're going to talk about how to adjust the skin tone on our bride and on our groom here separately than the rest of the image, right? But if you're a wedding or a portrait photographer, they're very important tools to be able to use. But for the most part, in general, most images are probably pretty good or close enough, where maybe you have some color issues with like white balance and you need to adjust everything in one foul swoop, or a group of images using, let's say, like a preset or something. So we're going to come back to this image. I'm going to move up into the photo library aspect here in the upper left corner. I'm going to click up there. We're going to switch folders really quickly. And we're going to do this because I have a group of images actually from one of the photographers at my wedding. And I believe he had his white balance either set incorrectly, or I'm not exactly sure what he did. Let's actually look, because we've got metadata here, don't we? I don't have, so here I've clicked on one of my images. I don't have a whole lot of info here. Great photographer, set his white balance to be a little bit warm. And what I want to do, as I click on our image, I'm going to go back into the upper left corner and click on customize. I'm going to have a whole group of photos that I need to adjust, all basically with the exact same white balance. So I'm going to introduce the tool to you by just adjusting one image, and then we're going to kind of save a preset and apply it to multiple images. And this is, I assume we have a wide swath of folks. Some people are very familiar with PhotoLab, so this is probably something that you already do, or might have a different technique than what I'm even going to show you. And then other folks who maybe didn't even realize that we could, do bulk edits like this and save presets and specific things like this. Now, as I show you some of these things, these are sort of my findings and some of the things that I tend to do, or are adjustment tools that I use. There are 15, 20, 100 different ways of doing these kinds of things as well. So I'm going to show you one, and hopefully it's an optimal way of doing it so that you can either speed along your workflow or simply get more control over your post-processing. Now, I've gone over to the left-hand side of the interface here, and I opened up my preset editor. So if you have your PhotoLab open right now, your preset editor might be closed by default, or it might just be sort of hidden away on the left side of your Customize section because your history and your navigator might be open. So I'm going to click on those two prompts, open up my preset editor. We're not going to use it yet. I just want it to be kind of ready to go. These are all of the built-in presets that come preloaded with PhotoLab. And we're going to end up basically making an adjustment and then clicking this button in the lower left corner of the preset editor, and that's going to help us to create our preset. All right, so we've established that left side. Let's move over to the right side of the interface. Let's jump into some of these feature sets. And right now I'm in, shoot, which one am I in? I'm in DxO Advanced. All right, so I'm going to reset something. I did a little bit of a run through of the webinar earlier, and I'm realizing I didn't reset absolutely everything back to where I wanted it to be for our webinar. But anyways, to tell you what I just did, in the top portion, and I'm on a Mac, of course, you can see that I'm on an Apple computer. If you're on a PC, it's going to work in a similar way, but maybe not exactly the same way. In the top portion of our drop-down menus here, under workspaces, we have the DxO Standard, we have DxO Advanced, which are a couple different ways of viewing the different tools that are within the Customize section of PhotoLab. I have two of my own custom workspaces that I've created, one for standard visible photography that I use pretty often. I called it Dan's process. Infrared, so this is a workspace that is primarily designed for doing post-processing on infrared photography. But here's the kicker here, you can save your own workspaces. So if you shoot one kind of photography or a whole bunch of different kinds of photography, you could have different workspaces that are optimal for the kinds of processing or the kinds of things that you like to do. The way that you would do that is basically you'd adjust the tools you have open and the tools you have available on the right side over here, using these tools basically to manipulate, also by adjusting which windows are open. And then you just basically save your workspace. Long story short, we're going to go from the DxO Standard to DxO Advanced. The right side of the interface is just going to slightly change as I click on that. So I'll switch that over, and basically the Advanced section here just has more of the tools open and ready to go. And if you follow me over into the upper right corner, I'm going to skip over most of these things because we're really only going to talk about color manipulation today. And we have light, color, optical or sharpening, geometry, which are the optical tools, local adjustments, and then watermarks. In fact, if you follow my cursor, I'm realizing I didn't tell you exactly where to look. If we click on these different tools, we can delineate between all of the tools. So if we are not clicked on one of these buttons, all of the tools will be open. But if we click on an individual button, we can kind of segment out the different portions or tool sets. Now, moving into the color section here, this is where we're going to spend most of our time. We're also going to move into the local adjustments tools. And actually, for anyone who uses control points or the local adjustment tool within PhotoLab here already, for a while I didn't even realize this button was here. And this button in the upper right corner allows us to control some of the facets of what the control points can do for us. So we will be getting into that a little bit today. For now, let's click back into color. And in this case, we need to make a color adjustment. And there's a few ways of doing that with white balance. We can, of course, start with our presets here. And this is you know, for those of you who are already familiar, this is going to be really redundant. These are presets, and they're presets that are, you know, pretty standard in raw processing tools. You've got your sort of standard daylight, you've got cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, shade. There's even an underwater one, which is pretty awesome. And then you've got your custom, right? So you can customize or create your own white balance as well, based upon the bandwidth or the parameters of the tool anyways. So with white balance, you've got your presets within the settings section. You have a temperature and you have a tint slider. And these are, you know, they work in a similar way to most other raw processing tools here. They are going to adjust the global white balance for us. And if I slide the temperature slider to the left, we're basically cooling the whole image down. In this case, not really in a very attractive way or engaging way, but it basically allows us to adjust our blue to yellow, and then your tint is going to control your green to magenta white balance. Now, I did adjust my temperature all the way over to the left, and that might seem crazy, but the white balance of this image originally is kind of so far off that I actually, in terms of a technique, will purposefully bring my temperature or tint all the way over to the left or all the way over to the right to kind of reset my eyes, knowing that this is way too far. And then I'm going to just slowly kind of drag it back until I get something close to what I want. And in this case, for some weird reason, the color temperature of the environment is, you know, calls for a temperature of 3715 or so. Now, as I'm doing that, I'm purely guessing based upon what I'm seeing on my screen. If my monitor isn't calibrated, then I can't trust it as much. But one thing that I can trust, and this is a very useful tool that is here within PhotoLab and is can be a really nice way to kind of really figure out what color is what, and that is your RGB values. Now, we're not going to go too far down the line of talking too much about RGB values, but if you notice where my cursor is here on the foreground in this chair, that chair is a white chair. I know that. I was there in the environment. If I knew that this person's shirt was a gray shirt, that's useful as well. And basically, by using the RGB readouts, which if you follow my cursor into the upper left corner, that would be these values up here. As I take my cursor and just scroll over stuff, you'll see the red, green, and blue designated as R173 right now. Green is 171, and blue is 170. And really the way to decode that, I'm going to take my cursor down into this white chair. Those values stand for red, green, and blue, and they work on an 8-bit scale, which broadly means 0 is black and 255 is white. So just to display that, if I take my cursor and I put it over the window back here that's blown out, you'll notice that the RGB readout in the upper left corner says 255, 255, 255. That means it's blown out, it's gone, no detail in there. That's good. That's our setting, or that, like, we can take a look and kind of get an idea of how these are reading. If we go and we scroll over this woman's pants here in the foreground, if the pants, or if the tone was completely black, that RGB readout that you're seeing in the upper left corner in the histogram section would read 000. In this case, it's reading 7 red, green 11, blue 11, right? Which is just indicating that it's really dark, and it's a little less red than it is green and blue, right? Now, as far as it pertaining to white balance, what we're looking for here, because I don't have a gray card, I don't know exactly what neutral is, that is gray with, or a tone, a brightness level that has no color. What I'm going to look for is I'm going to try to find something that should be gray and kind of take a guess, right? And as I scroll over the white chair here, and it reads 197, 193, 197, I move a little bit and it changes slightly. That's indicating to me that it's white. It's not blown out, but it's white. And it's pretty close to neutral. So what this is actually indicating right now, 190, I'm going to try to remove my finger. There we go. So it says we're red 196, green 193, blue 197. So technically that place where my cursor is a little bit magenta, but otherwise is pretty neutral, right? Because it's got less green in it than it does red or blue. Now, I've done a pretty good job kind of guessing with my slider here. Another way of utilizing the white balance tool, aside from the settings and aside from kind of just doing it by eye with your temperature and tint, is to use the color picker, right? So if I click on the color picker there in the upper right corner, and then I move into something that I know should be neutral, ideally something slightly brighter than middle gray usually is what's going to kind of work best. And I go and I click on one of these tones, we're going to get pretty close. And now I can actually keep clicking until I get the exact effect that I want. I'd say that's probably pretty close. I remember the chairs being, white, and then the ground, this isn't totally neutral, and our skin tones look pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that result, and I'm going to end up at, 3656 at -15. Anyways, that's a few different ways of using your white balance tool within the color section here, and a little bit of information as to how to utilize your RGB readouts in the upper left corner. Now that we've made this adjustment to the one photograph, I have all of these other images that I need to manipulate, I need to change. They all have the incorrect white balance. So what we're going to do is just click on the image that we manipulated. We're going to move to the left side of the interface here and open up our preset editor. We're going to move into the lower left corner of the preset editor, and we're just going to name this preset. Now, some presets you might create will generate a look or an aesthetic feel or something like that. And you're going to keep them for a long, long time because you're going to want your preset to do stuff to different images over a period of time. In this case, I'm kind of just making this preset for this one specific set of adjustments. This one, and I could technically probably copy and paste these things as well, but I tend to create this preset in case I come to another grouping of images that I just need to click on the preset. Anyways, long story short, new preset. We're going to name this Hughes White Balance Adjust. And I don't need to click apply, but basically I will just click out of it. That will save my preset. And what we can then do is go to our film strip down here at the bottom and highlight all of the images that we want to include. To do that, you literally just click on the first image that you want to adjust. So we'll say this one that ends with 940, and then scroll over to the end, hold the Shift button down on the keyboard, and click on the opposite end of the exposures that we want to manipulate. You can actually see that they're all highlighted. They're a slightly different tone of gray here. And then I'm just going to click the Apply button with my Hughes White Balance Adjustment preset, and it's going to make those adjustments for us. So now we've got all of our white balance adjustments. It might be a good idea to go and follow through, make sure that it is the right set of adjustments for us, but this is a way to very quickly manipulate groups of images that might need a white balance adjustment or have some sort of color issue, or maybe in a different situation, you've created an aesthetic adjustment and you wanted to apply that aesthetic adjustment to multiple images very quickly. Anyways, that's presets. It's just a little add-on here. Although it took us about 20 minutes, we've actually covered quite a bit of the interface. So I'm going to move back into the upper left corner, click into Photo Library. This is going to bring us to my folder structure, which probably looks crazy. And then we're going to go into our PhotoLab or color manipulation folder. Now, I clicked on PhotoLab. I clicked on the folder that I wanted to use for the rest of the presentation. And this little dialog comes up. And again, for folks who are already familiar, this is commonplace. One of the beautiful facets of DxO's PhotoLab is that it takes into account years of science and years of lab imaging and testing and profile creations for cameras and lens combinations. And so what you're seeing right now is a pop-up here indicating that these images that are within this folder used these particular cameras and these particular lenses. And what the software is asking you to do is download the profile that will adjust for optics and distortion, as well as potential color problems that we could run into due to the combination of the lens and the camera. So one of the beauties of PhotoLab, as I click download for each one of these, is that it will very quickly download those profiles for us, apply the profiles, and then automatically adjust the image based upon the optical properties and the camera sensor itself that these specific images were shot with. So now we've updated our profiles. Let's jump into our image. So we're going to start with this photograph here, and we are going to be dealing with color quite a bit, but I want to show you one more cool feature that's within PhotoLab in terms of finding and organizing your tools, right? So currently we're within the color section of the PhotoLab customize portion of the interface, and I want to crop the image. So I could click off of our color button, so you can see that color is highlighted here in the upper right corner. I'll click off of that, and then I could go through the menagerie of tools to click on the crop button if I wanted to, and that's relatively quick, but sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I just want to find it much quicker than that, or I don't want to have to kind of move through and look for every single tool. So what we can do is actually search for corrections. So, you know, it took me a long time to explain this, but I probably would have just clicked out of color and then typed in crop, and then the crop tool is going to just pop right up for us. And actually, technically, anything that has the word crop in it is also going to come up. So in terms of grain, I think the format here matters. So it doesn't have the word crop necessarily, but it is paying attention to your crop so that you can adjust your grain based upon that. This is a different tool. Total segue, we don't need to get in, or total sidetrack, we don't need to get into that. Let's talk about the crop. I'm going to click on the crop button. I'm going to click on manual here, and we're just going to crop this down actually to a 4:5 ratio, just for kind of giggles here and just to kind of clean up the composition. And I'm going to do it really quickly because we're not really here to talk about that tool set. I just wanted, kind of wanted it to be part of the presentation. So we'll crop these two a little bit closer. Now that I'm done with that, I'm just going to click the little X to the right of the search bar here. It'll clear it, and then we'll go back into color. And then here, let's see, on this image, I wanted to make a subtle white balance adjustment, and I wanted to introduce you to control points. So in this case, this was shot in the evening. I think it was shot with a flash as well. It looks like if we zoom in, we've got some kind of lighting happening here that's not, the daylight. It looks like it's two flashes or something along those lines. So let's kind of clean this up. Actually, before I make adjustments to white balance overall, I'm going to just really quickly remove a couple of the non-permanent sort of structures on this gentleman's face here. So he's got some spots here or there, little dry spots and stuff. So what I've done is I've clicked on the healing tool in the upper portion of the interface, and because we zoomed in, I might as well just clean this up. Basically, I'm in the repair option here, which is a really nice feature. Basically, I can go and click, or I can click and drag, and the software should automatically go and clean this up. Sometimes it's not exactly what we need, but it does do a pretty good job right off the bat, especially for these kinds of things. We're not here to talk too much about that, so I'm going to not worry too much about it right now and assume that either you're already using that tool or you can kind of investigate that if you want to check it out. Really nice, basically an automatic tool, and it'll allow you to clone or heal out all sorts of things that maybe you don't want in your image. All right, so I'm going to click close in the lower right corner. We no longer need the healing tool, so I click close, and that sort of closes it off for us. And the reason I want to make a white balance adjustment is because the photograph, I think the photograph was shot in the early evening. It's implementing flash, So the early evening white balance is going to be a little bit warm. The flash that's being used is probably a little bit blue, a little bit cool. And I would be totally okay with the background going a little bit warm, right? But the problem with a bride and a groom, if someone's wearing white and we start to manipulate our color balance globally, if we do this and I start to maybe warm the image a little bit so that their skin tones are a little more lively, a little bit nicer, their skin tones look a lot better. But now his white tuxedo and her beautiful white off-white dress isn't so neutral, right? It's a little bit too warm now, and that's kind of problematic. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a white balance adjustment based upon their clothing. That's going to make a global adjustment, and then I'm going to show you how to use control points to selectively white balance their skin tone so that we can kind of warm their skin tone back up. And we can do this either way. That is, we can adjust the global white balance using this tool in the upper right corner to give us the most pleasing skin tone, and then we can correct the dress and jacket. Or we can basically take our eyedropper here, kind of neutralize based upon his jacket or her dress. I don't believe her dress was actually white, so I'm kind of going off of, let's go off of his shirt. Oof, that's not right. So one of the things that can happen too is maybe his shirt wasn't actually white, and so it's not going to look that pleasing. I'm pretty happy when I'm white balancing off of his jacket there. So it looks good on my screen. I do have a calibrated monitor. I should point that out, although it's been about a month since I've calibrated, so maybe I should redo it for this laptop. All right, so I've white balanced based upon his jacket. I'm happy with the jacket. The skin tone's actually kind of okay at this point, but let's say we wanted to warm their skin tones. If you follow my cursor into the local adjustments section here in the upper right corner, upper right quadrant, I've activated the local adjustments. Now to use one of the localized adjustments, by default, I'm going to get a control point, which is what we're going to use. But if I wanted to use a different selective or localized adjustment tool here within PhotoLab, if I right-click on the image, this brings up this heads-up display, which is this menu that pops up. And this allows us to create a brush selection, an auto mask, our control points, which is what we're going to use in just a second, a control line, which is, it's like a gradient, but implements some of the facets of how control points make their selections. We're going to get into that in a minute as well. And then you've got a graduated filter as well. And then the ability to add a new mask, which is just a nice little quick shortcut. And if you needed to, you could erase, but we don't have a selection or an adjustment right now, so we are not going to erase anything. Anyways, I clicked on control point. We're going to go and just drop a control point right here on her skin tone. I'm going to zoom in just a touch. Let's zoom into 75% so we can kind of get a better idea of what's happening. Oops, what the heck happened there? Zoomed out to 6%. There we go. So I placed a control point on our bride's skin. And the first thing that we need to do when using control points is to kind of adjust the area of influence. And that is this circle that's going around the control point is going to be a certain size based upon the last control point that you used. And what it's going to do is it allows us to tell the software kind of how big an area we're basically attempting to make a selection of. And then the beauty of the control point is that it makes a selection without us having to do any work. We just literally place the point on the subject or on the object that we're trying to adjust. And then we can go into our adjustment sliders. So these are your light adjustments, our color adjustments, which is what we're going to use here in a second, and our detail adjustments. Here's a cool hack for folks who are pretty familiar with this. Some people prefer to work this way, and that is all of these tools can actually be turned on if I hold my shift button. Here I go and say that, there we go. If I hold the command button on my keyboard, I can turn on all of these sliders at one time. You can see that these are all highlighted. I don't tend to work this way, but I know a couple of my friends who use PhotoLab basically religiously, prefer to have their sliders just available to them. I don't mind switching between my different tools, but anyways, you can go from light, color, and detail. We're going to deal with color, and we're going to actually make an adjustment to the white balance based upon this selection that the control point is making. And the reason why this is so cool is that if you look at these numbers, temperature and tint, you'll notice that the temperature reflects this same number up here, 5348, right? And so as we make these adjustments, maybe to warm her skin ever so slightly, we don't even need very much, maybe just a few hundred Kelvin. And then maybe we even go into the tint, and I'll make her just a smidge more magenta. There we go. And then I say we go into our light adjustments and bring her exposure up just a touch here, right? So now what we've gone in and done is we've warmed her skin tone after we've neutralized their clothing. Now, if our groom here needed the exact same treatment, all we had to do is basically move over to the groom, place the point on the area that we wanted, probably his skin tone, which is what we're attempting to warm up, and we're going to get the exact same adjustment. So this control point and this control point are duplicates of each other. Well, this one is a duplicate of that control point. If for some reason that's not what you needed or wanted, you can click on your control point, tap the delete key to get rid of it. And if he needed a different adjustment, because maybe he had a very different skin tone that we needed to adjust, or different color temperature or whatever, what you would do is move into the lower left corner here, click on new mask, and we're going to be able to create a new control point. Hopefully. My computer's kind of going crazy right now. There we go. That was weird. Had a couple mishaps like that. So anyways, I click on a new control point, and now this is a new blank control point. So we can kind of go in and make any further adjustments that we need to. Increase the vibrancy. Let's maybe darken his skin tone just a smidge. There we go. We could go in very specifically with control points and adjust and whiten teeth. In fact, let's just do that really quickly, because that's not going to take long. So, the problem with whitening teeth, of course, is that it's very easy to take it too far. So we want to be very cautious with that. But what I'm going to do is go in, place a control point on her teeth. Let's zoom in to 100%, just so we can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to start by just dropping a little saturation. If we take too much out, you can see what the control point's doing, right? So it removed all color from her teeth, which is not what we want at all. But what I do want to do is maybe just desaturate her teeth a little bit, and then potentially take that temperature slider and start moving it towards the cool end of things. And again, I don't want to take it too far. It becomes blatantly obvious that we've whitened teeth if we do. But we can maybe duplicate that point, place it on his teeth, and now his teeth are a little bit more whitened. And so in print, when we print this giant canvas print of this this couple here, they're going to be ecstatic because they look great, and the coffee they just drank will not have affected their teeth. All right. Wow, it's 4:35 already. I feel like it's so easy to talk about this stuff. There's so many things to do. Let's jump into our next image. So the next tool that I want to talk to you about goes back to the global sorts of adjustments. So on the last image, we cropped, we made a subtle white balance adjustment, and then we went in with control points and we started to make some adjustments to sort of further control the image. In this case, we're going to basically just utilize the HSL tool, because not every image needs all sorts of adjustments. I guess if we were able to spend a little bit of time on these, more important images, maybe we would want to do some more selective adjustments. But one of the cool aspects of this HSL tool over here in the color wheel is that we have relatively granular control over color, even though the adjustment is going to adjust the color throughout the whole image. So let's take a look at this. We're in the HSL tool. Right now, I'm just in the sort of white light section here. So if I were to adjust saturation, it's just going to increase saturation to everything. But if we click into any of these different portions of the color wheel, what we would be doing if we made adjustments to our sliders down below or an adjustment to our sort of hue angle is that we're only going to be affecting these particular colors by default. And what I mean by that, let's click on green. When I click on green, if we were to make an adjustment to saturation, luminance, or uniformity, or if we were to change our hue angle by clicking on this button right here, sort of outside of the color wheel itself, and start to shift it, you can see what it's doing. We're adjusting the hue of just the greens, but we're adjusting the hue based upon this sort of preset that DxO has created to encompass the green portion of the color wheel. Well, you can adjust that as well, right? So how do I describe this? I'm sorry. The way to kind of conceptualize this is that the inner circle here allows you to control the general color that you're going to be getting into, right? So if I expand this inner circle to encompass from green all the way over into blue, this tool, if I adjust saturation, is going to affect basically anything that's on that side of the color wheel. It's going to add saturation to anything that's cool, right? Now, I'm going to go ahead and just double click on that. Nope, that one's not working for me. I'm going to bring that back to about its default. And I want to describe the outer setting here, right? And if I click on the outer circle and I start clicking to drag it back, what you'll notice is that I can only drag it back so far. And that is, I can only drag it back to be sort of parallel with the point itself at its angle, right? And what that basically means is if I make an adjustment to my greens right now, there is almost no kind of feather or fall off of the adjustment, because right now my angle here, my fall off or feather, is at 0. But if I click on my fall off, I can basically transition my range of color, right? So this is the gradient from this color, which is going to have the maximum adjustment of saturation, all the way over to blue at this point. So that's kind of like a gradient or a feather, right? And it's actually kind of reflected here in the outer kind of hue angle circle part as well. Sorry, I don't have a good vernacular now that I think of that to describe that portion. But the long and short of it is that the inner circle controls the kind of the maximum color that you're going to be adjusting, in that, based upon saturation, luminance, and uniformity. I'll talk about those in a second. And then the outer is the gradient or the feather. Now, from there, let's move down into saturation, luminance, and uniformity. Saturation saturation is kind of like a volume slider. If you drag the saturation to the right, we're going to get much more impactful color, much color that is more vibrant, more saturated, more turned up, right? Turn it up to 100, bam, we got lots of greens going on here. I'm going to leave saturation at 100% right now so that we can move into luminance. Luminance, for anyone not familiar, is the brightness of that particular color. It's the luminance. So if you drag it to the left, we'll be darkening down the stuff that's green in the frame. If we drag it to the right, we're going to be brightening the stuff that's green. Or rather, the way I should word it is we're going to be brightening the stuff that is encompassed basically within our selection here. And then uniformity, let's take the luminance down a little bit. So I've darkened the luminance, and I did that purposefully because I've got some greens right here, and then I've got some yellow-green in here. And if I take the uniformity slider and I slide it to the left, what you'll notice is that the difference between this green and that green just got wildly expanded. If I reduce uniformity at this point all the way basically down to like magenta, or like an orange color, what we're doing is we're separating those different colors, the greens here from the yellows there. Whereas if I increase uniformity, all of those colors are going to kind of render the same hue angle. They're going to look basically not the same exactly, but we're going to be kind of creating a more unified, uniformed color of that green. And it's purely aesthetic based upon what you're interested in having your color do. In this case, I do want to increase my saturation of my yellows a little bit, but not this much. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more. And then the other thing that I want to do is actually cool down, that is, shift the hue of my greens. So if you follow my cursor up into the hue angle here, if I click on this and I drag it to the right, basically I'm going to be warming up anything that's in this selection, anything that's green. If I drag it to the left, it's going to be cooling down anything that's green. If I take it way too far, it's going to be it's changing the hue, basically. I'm going to show you a cool trick with that in a couple minutes. But for now, I'm going to just subtly shift my hue angle to be a little bit cooler, a little bit more blue, and then I'm going to reduce my saturation back down to something that's a little more natural. And what's cool about this now, what's cool about it, is that I now have created a little bit more separation between this foreground element in our image. That's really cool, like cool as in green, compared to our couple, our skin tones. And so now what we've got is a little bit more of a color contrast just by using this HSL tool set to green. In fact, if we turn off HSL, there's the before, and there's the after. I think I've actually added a little more saturation than I need. It's got more impact for the webinar probably, but it doesn't look terribly natural. So I'm just going to reduce that and then take a look at the HSL on and off one more time by clicking the little check box, the little blue box that's to the left of the HSL label in the tools palette. So there it is off, and then there it is back on, right? So I'm happy with that result. I'm gonna keep moving here. That is the general walkthrough of using HSL, specifically in greens. I actually want to come back to this image in a little bit. I just want to cover a couple more things, and I'm seeing that it's 4:44 already. So let's go click on our next image. This is going to be really quick. I just want to show you a really interesting kind of fun trick that you can do. If you have foliage in an image and you have a portrait, oftentimes you can pull this off. And by the way, I show you this with this one particular use case. There might be other ways to utilize this. Maybe if you do flat lay or you do soft good clothing and you want to change the hue of a shirt or something, this could be a relatively easy way to do that. But anyways, we've clicked into this image. I'm going to turn HSL on, and then all I'm going to do here is click on green, because our foliage is primarily going to be greens and yellows. And then what we're going to do is click on our hue angle, and I'm going to shift this over so that we go from, you know, this summer wedding to a fall wedding, right? Now, you do have to be careful with this, and that is if the hue or the color of the foliage is any way reflected into the skin tone, that can be noticed when you shift this. So you do have to be careful. But this is just kind of a cool trick, right? And all we did was we clicked on the green within HSL, and then we shifted this. Now, one more way to show you how the tool is making its selection. If I click on our sort of ultimate green color here and I start dragging it towards magenta, you'll notice their skin tones are now encompassed, right? Because if we look at our gradient here of color, that gradient sort of pushes into our skin tones. So you do want to be careful of that. I'm going to tap Command Z to undo that setting. I'm going to just sort of feather our edge of our colors a little bit, and I'm going to shift this. Well, you can kind of see if we just click on it and drag it all the way through, it does do a nice job. I'm not affecting the skin tone because of the fact that we're not selecting the skin tone. So it does have an interesting effect. It's fun. All right, let's jump into this image. I still need to show you a little bit more about control points, and I need to talk to you about the control lines as well, which is a new feature within PhotoLab 5, and it's a really interesting facet within the selective adjustment tools. So let's do that. Do we need to make an adjustment to our global HSL? No. Maybe we need to make a little of a small adjustment to white balance here. Let's see what happens if we click on flash. Nope, that's way off. So we'll go back to daylight, see what that's going to do. Nope, I think as shot's probably pretty close to where we need it to be. Maybe we'll go into our temperature and we'll just slide this a little bit to the left and then slide our magenta a little bit. Oop, went too far. A little bit to the right, just to add a little bit of a magenta tone to it. Here's the problem that we're running into again, and this is common problems that you can run into with wedding photography, is it's the integration of flash with whatever the ambient light is, right? And so right now we have this kind of lovely highlight that's on our bride here, and you know, in the reflection, I imagine, or this is actually, which one's reflection? I'm not sure. I know there's a mirror going on here because this is the photographer with the flash. But anyways, we've got some nice, cool highlights. We have some elements that are a little bit distracting. And so what I want to do is direct your attention as the viewer towards our bride and a little bit away, or towards our subject rather, and then a little bit away from some of the more distracting elements. So to start with, we're gonna activate our local adjustments. We're gonna right click and we're gonna utilize our control line. So we've already talked a little bit about control points, right? The control point is gonna make a selection basically inside of that circle of the thing that we place the point on. Now, it's not making a circular selection. It's just making a selection of her skin that is inside the area of influence, inside of her skin tone there. So I'm gonna leave that control point on her. I'm gonna click on new mask. We're going to utilize a control line. And what we're gonna do is just basically drag out what looks to be a gradient, but what's going to react more like a control point in terms of the way it's making its selection, because I basically placed the gradient in this way, right? So I've clicked and dragged, and it's going to give me this linear gradient feature. I'll show you what that means. In fact, let's go into the exposure and let's just darken this down. You'll notice it does a nice job to sort of darken those tones down, and depending upon where we place our gradient, we can kind of push further or not so far into our image. Now, one of the interesting facets of this control line is that it is taking a sample of the tone and color of wherever this little eyedropper is. So you'll notice there's a little eyedropper that's to the left of the feature. If you click on that eyedropper tool and you drag it around, you can basically tell the software what tone it should be making a selection of, right? So if I go and I drop this on this highlight of her skin tone, anything that is inside of the gradient that is this similar tone and color to where we placed it is going to be affected. If I take this little eyedropper and I stick it back over this dark area, well, now the software knows and understands that we want this section to be affected, and it's going to make basically a custom selection. Let me show you that. So we've placed our control line. We're going to move into the upper right corner of the interface here, and I'm going to click on local adjustments. Inside of the local adjustment section there in the upper right corner, we have a list. We have our control line, and then we have the control point that we placed on her face. We haven't done anything with the control point. It's just sort of sitting there right now. But now within the control local adjustments section, we're able to adjust the selection that control line is making. And check this out. If you follow my cursor towards the sort of center but bottom portion or bottom right quadrant of the interface here, and I click on Show Masks, right now what you're seeing is a mask of the selection that's being made with this control line. I didn't show you this feature before with control points, but it does the same thing with control points as well. And what this is indicating to us is that anything that is sort of highlighted with white is what is being affected by the control line, and anything that is, not visible, there's no change in the mask, or it goes dark, right? It's all black up here, is not affected. So if I click on our little eyedropper tool one more time, just to show you what happens, and I click on it and I drag it, we can kind of instantly shift the selection that's being made based upon what we place the eyedropper on. And this is going to help us to refine the area that's being affected. So we're using a gradient with the eyedropper. Cool. Now, back into the upper right corner, if we move into Chroma or Luma, we can actually control the way the adjustment line, the control line makes its selection. By sliding the Chroma up and to the right, we are honing in on the very specific colors that we've placed that eyedropper on. If we drag it to the left, we're kind of opening up the floodgates, and we're basically letting anything of any color be selected and adjusted there. So now our control line is only going to be controlled by the luminosity, right? Where we can kind of affect the selection that's being made based upon the brightness of where we've placed this eyedropper. Long story short, these two sliders give us a lot more control over exactly where our adjustments are being made. Now, one of the cool aspects of displaying our mask is it also shows that we're maybe affecting some areas that we don't want. And so to clean this up, you've got a couple different options. You can actually click on this little minus here, and you can just draw out another line if you wanted to, and that's going to help to remove that area. I haven't found really great success using the minus control line. So I'm going to delete that and show you what I tend to do at this point to refine any of my selections, let alone control lines or control points. And that is, if I right-click, sorry, my computer's going a little wonky. If I right-click on my image while I have, oh wow, give it a second. Okay, so if I right-click on my image while I have my control line on, and then I go in and I click on control point or my brush, I can actually add control points or a brush. In this case, I'm using minus control point to remove the effect of our control line where we don't want it to be. This is beautiful and brilliant. Like, I don't want her hair to be affected, so I'm going to place a control point in her hair. Because this is a minus control point, it's removing the adjustment or the effect that the control line was putting on that portion of the image. Now, I show you that show masks option. It is handy to kind of get a sense of where where the adjustment is affecting the image. I don't find myself using the show masks all that often. What I'm tending to do, I'm going to click into this tool here. What I tend to do at this point is place my control point or my control line or my brush or whatever, and make my adjustment. And then I just take minus control points and place it in any area that visually doesn't look good with my adjustment on it. So I guess what I'm getting at is when I'm trying to streamline my workflow a little bit, I'm not going to go into that show masks tool all the time, or if ever, because what I care about is less of exactly where the adjustment or the selection is being made most of the time, and I'm more concerned with do I like what it looks like? Does it fit the parameters of what I'm trying to do? And is it going to be printable, or is it going to be deliverable to the client, no matter, however we're going to be utilizing it? Anyways, we got into a lot of stuff today. We talked about the interface. We got into a little bit of making presets, HSL, talked about hue shift, color wheel, control points, all sorts of things. Let's take a quick look at our before and after. So this is the original image, and then utilizing the PhotoLab 5 automatic, the profile, and then the automatic adjustments, as well as our white balance, and then some of our other little adjustments here. I like what we've got. I actually cooled the image a little more than I want, but we can see our before and after one more time. I'm going to tap Tab on my keyboard. There's the before. There's the after. Quick, easy. All of those adjustments could have been done within about, I don't know, a minute, maybe 2 minutes, had we not been explaining every facet of what we were doing. All right, Lori, I went over by a little bit more time than I meant to for the demonstration portion, but do we have any questions?
Just a couple. There are a couple people that actually work on a Windows machine, so they're not seeing the same exact show mask buttons that you have. So my suggestion is for them to go to our website, DxO.com, and look at the user guide, because they've got screenshots for both Mac and Windows, and it should be able to show you where you can find those show mask buttons. Mostly, I think they're pretty much the same, but there's a few little differences between Mac and Windows. So
little interface tweaks. Yeah.
Yeah. Eric was asking, what is the best way to handle images where DxO does not have the data to create the sensor optical profile?
Well, so I guess it depends. It's a broad question, because sometimes, either the camera is not supported necessarily, or more often than that, because the system does support a lot, most contemporary digital cameras. Usually what's happening is there's a camera that's got a mismatched lens or something, like an analog lens being adapted or something. So if that's happening, you can go into your geometry, and let me tap tab on my keyboard. You can go into geometry, and you can, for the most part, fix any distortions and vignetting problems that might be occurring. That would be here in distortion, potentially in volume deformation as well. And then I think the vignetting tool is actually within the light section. In terms of sharpening, so the profile does a couple different things. It's gonna control the optical sort of distortion and vignetting that might be occurring. It also is going to help to put an automatic sharpening based upon the lens that you're using at the particular f-stop, and potentially even the zoom. There's not much you can do about that sort of automatic sharpening, except go into the detail section and kind of manually add in your sharpening. Now, what I've done now, and I'm sorry, I don't have a really good answer for this part. I think if the camera doesn't have a match, or sorry, if DxO doesn't have a match for the camera lens combination, this lens sharpness isn't on automatically, and I'm also not sure if you can use it, because this setting is based upon the lens sensor combination. But even if lens sharpening isn't on, you've got unsharp mask down here that you can turn on and try to get back some of the sharpness that might be lost because of the combination of the lens and the sensor, and then the interpolation of the raw file and so on.
Okay.
That's my answer. That's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, so perfect timing. Dan, thank you so much for this presentation and going over all the color combination and ways to change things and the control points and control lines. It was very informative. I hope that you folks found it informative as well. And I wanted to thank you again. Please join us for another webinar. Dan will be with us again next month for another exciting webinar. I think you're going to be doing Nick next month. So
yeah,
it's always exciting. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let Dan close out. Thanks again, everybody.
Yeah, thanks again for joining, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully this has been helpful. I love doing these webinars. I hope that it was informative and useful and somewhat entertaining. Please come back and see us again. They're a lot of fun, and stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.